Well, we as a fantasy community, pat yourself on the back. We did an excellent job drafting wide receivers last year because if you look at the top 8 wide receivers per game, it's Kupp, Jefferson, Chase, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, A.J. Brown, and C.D. Lamb. Top 8 per game last year in PPR. The only miss in terms of ADP was Deebo Samuel. If you look at the top 8 wide receivers that were drafted last year, it was basically those guys except substitute Deebo Samuel for A.J. Brown. So it was very top-heavy last year. It was very predictable last year in that sense. And we welcome you to the 2023 Wide Receiver Preview Part 1. We'll do a bit of an overview here. We'll give you some strategies, some sleepers, breakouts, and busts. Hopefully get into the early round ADP a little bit because we'll have a full ADP review on tomorrow's show. I'm Adam Azer with Dave Richard, Jamie Eisenberg, and Heath Cummings. Okay, I did this with you guys for running backs. I'd like to do it again to start the wide receiver show. Who are some of your guys? Some guys that you're higher on in the industry, some guys that you find yourself drafting a lot. Jamie Eisenberg, hello, good morning. Who are some of your guys at wide receiver for 2023?
Hello, good morning. I would say pick your second-year wide receivers. So Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Christian Watson, love all those guys. I'm very excited about the setup from Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's now my number 6 wide receiver, so ahead of Devontae Adams, ahead of C.D. Lamb, just outside the first round. Draft a lot of Calvin Ridley, a lot of Jerry Jeudy, and I think those are guys. And then the late round guys for me, Nico Collins is definitely a target. Elijah Moore is definitely a target. Romeo Dobbs definitely a target. So those are 3 guys that I tend to gravitate toward with late round picks.
All right, Heath Cummings, same question to you. Who do you find yourself drafting a lot or are higher on than consensus?
Definitely in round 1, it's Tyreek Hill. He's my wide receiver 3 and my number 3 overall pick in full PPR. So I get him anytime I don't draft Chase or Jefferson, it seems like. Or if I'm at the end of the draft, which is just terrible this year. In the mid rounds, Christian Kirk, Deebo Samuel, Jahan Dotson for sure. Probably Jordan Addison. And that's probably good. The late round, definitely like Nico Collins has been the most common guy I've drafted late.
Dave?
Nico is a popular name, and he's gathering steam just because he was a candidate to be the number 1 receiver in Houston, but Stroud's look good. He's looked good. It looks like he's the number one receiver, Keep your name on the tip of your tongue. He's going to be a top 100 pick. A lot of names that have already been blurted are guys that I've been with. I have drafted a lot of DJ Moore in round 4. I like that. I've gotten a lot of DeAndre Hopkins in late round 4. I'm starting to be more encouraged by what I'm reading out of Tennessee on him. I can co-sign on Calvin Ridley. You guys know I've been talking about Ridley for a long time. Jerry Jeudy is up there. Christian Watson, George Pickens. How could I forget about George Pickens? And then when we get to those mid to late round picks, Zay Flowers in Baltimore, Sky Moore in Kansas City.
I don't think Heath or Dave did. Jamie, did you say Gabe Davis?
No, Gabe Davis is going to, yeah.
I just felt like that was a guy that all of us seem to love the value for. I think we have him consensus at wide receiver 36, Gabe Davis. And everybody, Dave, Jamie, and Heath, they're all right around 36 with him, and that's higher than his ADP basically on every site. On Fantasy Pros, he's wide receiver 45. On some sites, he's pretty close to 36, but I think Gabe Davis is someone that we as a team here that we kind of like. All right, so how important is it to draft a wide receiver with one of your first 2 picks? Do you guys find that very important to leave the first 2 rounds with a wide receiver?
1,000%.
More important in full PPR, more important if I start 3 wide receivers.
But, and of course I'm going to say this, if there's a receiver that you're just kind of on, but there's a running back that you're goo-goo about, and you've already taken 1 running back, don't pass up the running back.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, I feel like I'm reforming a little bit to what is happening with wide receivers, and I understand the value of elite wide receivers. Jefferson's my 101. I've got a bunch of wide receivers in my first round, so I'm not opposed to taking receivers in round 1. In a basic situation when I'm drafting, sure, I'll take one of those stud wide receivers with my first 2 picks. That makes sense. especially if it's what Heath just talked about, full PPR. You have to start 3 wide receivers. It makes sense to do it. Just, I guess what I'm saying is don't pass up value at another position, and don't force yourself. Don't wedge yourself in to taking a wide receiver with one of your first 2 picks.
And Jamie, when you said 100%, why such conviction on wanting to get a wide receiver in one of the first 2, in at least one in one of the first 2 rounds?
Yeah, I mean, I will say I agree with Dave 100%, and I think you should always, not go in saying I'm going to do this, but you said the word want, and so want is I want to have a wide receiver with one of my first 2 picks. I'm certainly not going to pass up value if it lands in my lap. If I go in thinking, okay, I'm targeting Bijan Robinson at 6 or 7 overall, and he goes, and then it's like, okay, what am I doing? And then Travis Kelce sitting there, and I didn't intend it. I'm gonna take Travis Kelce, or I'm planning on. I like Amon-Ra St. Brown, 13th overall, but Saquon Barkley falls, and Stephon Diggs is still there, who I like better. So I'm not gonna, all of a sudden, that's the route I'm going. So never stick to something that's, you're have a game plan, but don't necessarily feel like you have to stick to it. So do I want to get a wide receiver with one of my first 2 picks? 1,000%. Do I feel bad if I don't because great players fell to me? Then I'm going to pivot.
When you guys look at the round 3 wide receivers, there's this group of 3 of Devontae Smith, T. Higgins, Chris Olave that have 3rd round ADPs. And then after that, I think you have DK Metcalf, who's right there. But I'm using Fantasy Pros average draft position, by the way. But is there a huge drop-off? I'll start with you, Heath, in your opinion, from the round 2 guys who would finish with, Adams, A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Garrett Wilson, and then Jalen Waddle, who's right at the 2-3 turn. Then you get into Smith, Higgins, Olave, Metcalf. Those are round 3 picks. Is there a big difference between Amon-Ra St. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Jalen Waddle, let's say those guys, and then Devontae Smith, T. Higgins, Chris Olave?
Yeah, I would put Waddle in the Higgins range. There's a pretty big difference for me after you get past Garrett Wilson. So that's my wide receiver 10. Amon-Ra St. Brown, A.J. Brown, CeeDee Lamb. Those guys are quite a ways ahead, almost a full round ahead of Higgins and Waddle. And then I don't think DK Metcalf deserves to be in that discussion.
It's like those receivers, those top 10 guys, this is for me. I'm expecting them to average 16 or more PPR points per game. And then the group you mentioned and what Heath also said, Waddle, this is my group, Waddle, Devontae, T. Higgins, Olave, and I would put Judy in this group too. Those are the receivers I'm looking for 15 PPR points per game from. So it's like a full point plus difference from tier 1 to tier 2. And then the tier after that, those are the guys I'm looking for 14 PPR points from. Those are guys like DJ Moore. I think he can get there. 14, that's what I think he can get to. Keenan Allen, Calvin Ridley, Hopkins. Mm-hmm. To me, that's what the tiers are for wide receivers. You're talking about a full point per game difference from one to the next to the next.
I don't know why Jalen Waddle's not in that tier with the other guys. I mean, I want to talk about
should be 100%.
I would say so. He was obviously crushed by the non-Tua games, specifically the Skylar Thompson games, but he wasn't as good with Bridgewater as Tyreek Hill. Well, he wasn't as good in general without Tua as Tyreek Hill was. But, is that really what if Tua plays 16, 17 games? Waddle could be a top 5 wide receiver. He's so damn good. He's arguably the most explosive wide receiver in football. I mean, that sounds crazy, but it's
he is.
Figure it out.
And look at his profile. Rookie season sets the rookie record for receptions, has over 100 catches, comes back the next season with a different regime and a healthy Tua, and he completely changes his game, his yards per catch, and just becomes an explosive guy. So he can do it all, and that's the fun part about it is, and I also think, based on like what Tyreek Hill is saying, I'm sure what Tua, has said, I just know Tyreek's actually put words to it. I'm sure Waddle as well. They were really learning on the fly last year. And now you're getting it for a full off season again, a healthy Tua Tagovailoa again, to at least open the season, and a worse group around them. You take away at least Gesicki from a talent standpoint, young tight ends. I don't care about Robbie Chosen. He's whatever. Braxton Berrios, whatever. He can make all the plays in camp he wants. I don't care. These two guys are going to get so many opportunities. And that's the fun of drafting them, is you don't have to worry about other guys. You don't have to worry about, they're almost, I don't want to say guaranteed for 150 targets, but you could say they're as close to a guarantee as 150 targets. And that's the best part about drafting these guys. I
will amend what I said. Waddle does belong. It should be a top 11, not a top 10. Let me tell you why. He averaged 18.1 PPR points per game last year in 11 games when Tua played at least 90% of the snaps. I was at camp yesterday. You're right. Like, no one's going to draft Robbie Chosen or Braxton Berrios, but those guys might combine for 5 or 6 targets per game. I thought
Great.
Mike White.
That's perfect. Thank you. Keep him at 5 or 6 targets per game. I love it.
If I was really that worried about Robbie Chosen or Braxton Berrios, I would have Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill ranked lower. I would also be fired from my job. Mike White had a better day in practice on Wednesday than Tua did. The backup quarterback situation's been addressed. I feel a lot better about drafting Waddle and Tyreek based on just the fact that if they do lose Tua, Mike White's there. He's looked good. And then Waddle also suffered a rib injury in practice. We don't know the severity. If you're drafting this weekend and you've got some dorks in your draft who see that injury tag next to Waddle's name and they pass on him, take advantage. Anytime you can get him in round 3 in half or full PPR, buy that dip.
I do think like the difference is between those top 10 and T. Higgins, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle. The top 10 are all the number 1 target earners on their team. They're all the clear number 1 wide receiver. Jalen Waddle, like, I know there was a big time difference when Tua wasn't there, but he had 117 targets last year, and he had a lot of games with Tua where he had 5 or 6 targets. I don't think expecting him, like, I think 150 targets is probably not a fair upside, even if Tyreek Hill's there. Whereas the rest of those guys, Garrett Wilson, ARSB, AJ Brown, CeeDee Lamb, Devontae Adams, Diggs, Chase, Jefferson, Hill, Kupp, those guys are all like in projections projected to be close to 150 targets or 190 or 180 in some of those guys' cases.
Yeah, fair enough. Obviously, you have to be great in yards per target, and Jalen Waddle was, I think, the best in yards per target last year. He had a lot of big plays. Sometimes that comes down.
Yeah,
and we saw that with Chase, right?
That's going to regress. He's not going to average 11.6 yards per target again.
For what it's worth, he had 117 targets in 17 games. He was on pace for only 125 targets in just the Tua games, the 12 games that Tua started and finished. But, maybe that goes up. All right, so a little bit of disagreement there on Jalen Waddle. Either he's a second-round pick or he's a third-round pick. It's not a huge difference there. I guess I was trying to basically say, like, if you don't draft a wide receiver in rounds 1 or 2, you still feel like you can cobble together a good receiving core, right? You just probably want to be in round, probably no later than round 4, I would think.
I think that's the greatest thing about the early pick this year, because we talked about it on the running back preview. Like, you might be fortunate enough to get McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor, or McCaffrey and Derrick Henry, or McCaffrey and Josh Jacobs. And so you don't have a wide receiver. But if that happens, you're going to have one of Higgins, Waddle, Devontae Smith, or Olave still as your number 1 wide receiver. It's still going to be okay. It's just you're not going to have one of those top 10 guys.
Let's play a quick hypothetical here. You go McCaffrey with the 2nd overall pick. You can't believe it. Josh Jacobs or Jonathan Taylor or Tony Pollard or Derrick Henry made it to you in the 2nd round. We're talking 12-team leagues here. And let's say we're even talking 3-receiver 12-team leagues. You go ahead and you take that 2nd running back. You got McCaffrey and Josh Jacobs or Jonathan Taylor or whatever. Now in round 3, Jalen Waddle's off the board because his ADP is 24. So let's say you're talking Olave, Devontae Smith, or T. Higgins, or Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts. What do you do now? And so you've got 2 running backs, and Mahomes is off the board, but Allen or Hurts is there, and you're in that next tier of wide receiver. What do you do there? And we can throw Mark Andrews in the equation. And one thing I want to say before you answer this is every time we do drafts, the end of round 4 seems to be like kind of where the top 24 wide receivers end. But if you look at average draft position anywhere other than NFC, basically on CBS, on Fantasy Pros, on Draft Sharks, the top 24 wide receivers are making it into round 5, sometimes deep into round 5. You can get 22, 23, 24 at the position. So with that being said, you've got 2 running backs already. What do you do in round 3? Do you settle for the lower tier at wide receiver, or do you take that elite quarterback or Mark Andrews? And I'll start. I'd go in quarterback every time.
Yeah, I'm gonna lean that way.
You're going receiver, Jamie?
Yeah.
Dave quarterback.
I would lean quarterback over a wide receiver that's got 15 PPR point expectations.
I would go quarterback, but I don't know ADP wise if it makes sense that those wide receivers and those two quarterbacks would both still be there.
That's fair.
It's a hypothetical.
Like there's been a lot of running backs taken in the second round of this draft. If those wide receivers and those quarterbacks are both still there,
You're
and
drafting
Mark
with
Andrews.
11 Daves.
Let's see. Well, Mahomes 19. No, I mean like Ramondre Stevenson is in that range. Najee Harris could go there. So it's like if I look at, I'm just
Please
looking.
don't take Najee Harris there.
I'm looking at Draft Sharks right now, and that scenario is actually very realistic. It's McCaffrey is 2. Josh Jacobs is 21. So let's say he fell to 23. Waddle's 24. Devontae Smith is 25. Jalen Hurts is 26. So and Olave and T. Higgins are still on the board, and so is Mark Andrews. And I don't want to get sidetracked too much on that. Let's move forward a little bit here. We've talked a little bit about how to start your draft in terms of wide receiver. Answer this one for me. I want blank of my top blank wide receivers.
3 of my top 3. Ideally, I'd like 2 of my top 22 wide receivers.
I would like 4 of my top 30.
Wow, that's aggressive.
Yeah, I think that works because there's some guys in my top 30 they're going to fall to round 7 or round 8.
Exactly.
Yeah, but 3 of 26 sounds good too. So, but yeah.
When I looked at our pick by pick series, 12 teams, so 6 people drafting, 2 teams apiece, the 4 of us plus Dan and Chris. Okay, so in the first 4 rounds, it was 10 of the 12 teams drafted at least 2 wide receivers in the first 4 rounds. And that was about 24 wide receivers. I don't have the exact count, but it was about that. So I got screwed and missed out on a huge run and was one of the 2 teams that didn't get 2 of the top like 23. But that, Dave, what you said is what I was thinking. I think everybody probably wants 2, correct me if I'm wrong, 2 of a group that would end maybe around DK Metcalf, who we are lower on than everybody else, or, Drake.
How about Amari Cooper?
Well, he's 20th, 22nd, and where does Heath have Cooper? 27th.
7.
All right. I think to sum it up, two of the top 24. Can we start with that? 2 top 24 wide receivers, and then
I
if
would
you
prefer
want
3.
Yeah, that's the thing is it's like if you're talking about via ADP, then maybe I'm okay with that because there's 5 wide receivers in the top 24 that I'm not drafting anywhere close to where they're going. But via my own rankings, I agree with Jamie. It's 3 of my top 24 because there's guys I can get in later.
It's also, again, what we've said, the running back value that's going to be there in rounds 4, 5, and 6 is still pretty good as well. So, if you're starting 3 wide receivers in a PPR league and you can get an edge on that position, it's a huge advantage for you.
Should be a huge advantage.
Okay. Well, I want to tell you about another way you can get a huge advantage in your league, and that is with private Zoom calls with any of us, plus Chris and some others, and other ways to donate to St. Jude during our Draftathon, which is going to culminate on August 30th with a 6-hour show, which we're really excited about, and we'll tell you more and more about as we start planning it. But this whole month is just about raising money for St. Jude, and you can do that at tinyurl.com/FFT donate. tinyurl.com/FFT donate. At some point pretty soon, you're also going to be able to do that on our YouTube page, youtube.com/fantasyfootballtoday. But we're giving away spots in our mock drafts. We're giving away spots, guest appearances on the podcast. Right now, it's only $152 for a guest appearance on our podcast. And again, all of it goes to an amazing cause. All of it goes to St. Jude. Podcast Awards, thank you for getting us to the next round in the best sports podcast category. If you get an email from Podcast Awards asking you to be a voter, go ahead and accept that. You can vote and vote for us. Before we go to break here, I do think I'm owed an apology from Heath and Jamie. I had one of my best takes yesterday. You guys, as if you were Dan Schneider on a podcast, were crapping all over it, like on the can. But 2/3 of the people who responded to my poll agreed with me that it's better to not have the total outlier league winner that's only on one team, the Christian McCaffrey, the LaDainian Tomlinson, that it's better to have more parity, more evenly spaced out studs like we had last year. You guys are wrong about this, and you owe me an apology, and I am listening.
Adam, I apologize that I will never apologize to you for not apologizing about your stupid take.
Thank you, Jamie. That means a lot to me. Heath, anything to say?
I apologize that I did not retweet your poll so that you could get more accurate results and not just people who choose to follow you.
Go ahead, retweet it. You still have time.
What the hell did I miss?
And then you can say,
Adam, you were right.
and I'll say thank you, Heath.
Adam would like it if, can we just make it even? Like, we'll all put $20 in at the beginning. At the end, we all get $20 back. It was fun. Good job.
What was the best comment yesterday about the Adam wants to see a gladiator match where the two guys walk out and shake hands?
Yeah. Dave, I don't love it when there's one player that's just so much more valuable than everyone else. I remember, I don't know, 7-8 years ago, whatever it was, somebody said, oh yeah, I had 2 undefeated teams. I was like, oh yeah, Todd Gurley.
Oh,
I don't like that. Last year,
you sound like a guy who's lost a lot of leagues.
well, I mean, there's only one person in the league that's going to have that player. Last year was great.
Yeah,
You didn't
that's
have
the
that.
point.
Yeah, but you can't necessarily predict that player. All right, anyway, let's take a break.
That's our job.
No, that's also part of the point.
Did you predict Cooper Kupp? Did you?
What?
Did you predict Cooper Kupp 2 years ago?
No.
No. Did we draft Jonathan Taylor 2 years ago as running back 1? No, he was like a borderline one.
I remember being excited about Jonathan Taylor 2 years ago. I was also excited about Jonathan Taylor 1 year ago.
Well, listen, I want to thank Jamie and Heath for apologizing for something. That was big of you. We'll take a break, come back with some sleepers, breakouts, and busts. All right, we are back here. And do you guys have any other wide receiver strategies or must-have tips going into drafts, or did we cover it all? It's fine if we covered it all.
I would simply add that it's deep as usual, and you're going to get to a point where all the receivers kind of look and feel the same, where the difference between can we quantify it on the fly? Maybe we can. I've got a group of, like, my 24th receiver is Terry McLaurin. He's never been much higher than 13 PPR points per game. Drake London's behind him. Christian Kirk's behind him. Go all the way down to guys like Jordan Addison, Gabe Davis, John Dotson. Would it surprise you if those guys were around 12 PPR points per game? Probably not. And there's a difference of like 12 spots among my wide receiver positions, and those guys are going over 20 picks later than McLaurin, London, Kirk.
I think it's really worth pointing out that compared to running back, wide receiver has not been as top heavy. And I say that even with having said what I started the show with, that the top 7 in points per game were, among the first 8 drafted. But you also, then you had Amon-Ra St. Brown, you had Devontae Smith in there. Last year, or 2021, Cooper Kupp was a 4th round pick, and he was the most valuable player in fantasy. Deebo Samuel and Jamar Chase were top 5 wide receivers, and they were round 7 and 8 picks. The year before that, Chris Godwin, or maybe that was 2019, whatever it was, Chris Godwin was wide receiver 2. He was a mid-round pick. DK Metcalf, Calvin Ridley were 4th round picks and finished top 5. There's more of that at wide receiver than there is at running back. And in fact, there have been a lot of really, really good picks in rounds 7 through 9 the last 2 seasons. I mean, like I said, Deebo Samuel, Jamar Chase in 2021. Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think, made that cut last year. Devontae Smith was, I think I might be forgetting someone. Christian Kirk. So I do think that's important to note, that there's more shakeup in terms of ADP and finish, less top heavy at wide receiver,
Except for last year.
Running back. Last year in the top 6 was very top heavy, but top 12 was a lot of guys that were drafted a lot later. Like I said, Devontae Smith and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Christian Kirk finished top 12 overall, not per game. Jalen Waddle was terrific, and he was kind of like a 4 or 5 turn pick. So, Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper was a top 12 guy. He was a later pick. So yeah, last year was top 6 was very, very stud heavy. But after that, it was great values, great bargains. And that we see that a lot at wide receiver. So I don't know what that means. I mean, I think that means you need to take some shots in the mid to late rounds at wide receiver. Don't fill up too fast, I guess.
I don't.
But
And
I
that's
think,
the
again,
thing.
that speaks to where these guys are now being drafted. They're getting pushed up. It's why we're seeing this. It's the dead zone conversation that we're having that's different now, because these running back values that are falling to these later spots of guys that would typically be ranked in the top 20 that we would be taking in the rounds 2, 3, and 4 range are now going in the rounds 5, 6, and 7 range. So it's pushing up all these wide receivers. So I think that's kind of where, if you're planning out a strategy, it's lean receiver early and buy into those running backs in the middle group, with maybe the idea of taking a hero RB approach. Take one of those guys and then get receiver heavy and then go back to the running backs again.
I don't really agree with the idea of don't fill up too early. Like you don't have to just draft your starters in order of when you draft your starters. If you can start 4 wide receivers in a PPR league, you can draft 5 wide receivers before you draft 1 running back.
Agreed.
Okay. What if it's a 2 receiver league with a flex?
Then you could draft 4 wide receivers.
4 instead of 5.
Okay. Do you worry that you get to a point where you need help at running back, you need help at tight end, you need help, you haven't drafted your quarterback yet, or maybe you haven't drafted one of your quarterback or your tight end, and now you're in round 7 or 8, and I just told you that we actually have, look, we have a lot of busts in round 7 and 8 at wide receiver, or probably at running back too. It's round 7 and 8 for a reason, right? Tight end is pretty bad there sometimes too. So I'm not going to say every wide receiver that goes there is good. I am going to say, though, that we have had some absolute superstars, some studs come out of that range each of the last 2 seasons. Do you worry about really not being able to draft a wide receiver at that point, because you have to fill your other positions?
I think the worst thing you can do at quarterback or tight end is get to round 7 or 8 and think, oh, no, I don't have one. I have to take one now. It goes completely against great or late.
All right, moving on. I guess we'll stick with strategy here. In 10-team leagues, in 14-team leagues, in 3 receiver leagues, does anything change dramatically for you guys with the way you approach wide receiver?
No.
I hesitate a little bit to say nothing changes in a 14-team league that starts 3 wide receivers. I think you have to prioritize that just a little bit more, because the depth kind of goes away a little bit. You almost have to prioritize going running back receiver with your first 2 picks. It's a little bit tougher to pass on a positional need and take the value in that type of specific format.
Yeah, I'm more balanced in 14-team probably. And in 10-team, I'll push those elite QBs and tight ends up a little bit higher because elite players. But that's pretty much it.
Yeah, if you have any pick in a 10-team league, you should feel good about, if you don't take a wide receiver with either of your first 2 picks, you're going to get one of Olave, Smith, or Higgins in round 3. I mean, they're not all going to go in the top 30. And in fact, if you wanted to double up on them in rounds 3 and 4, you could easily do that in a 10-team league.
You might see them in round 4.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, how about non-PPR versus half PPR versus full PPR? Anything change dramatically there?
Yep. I'm almost certainly taking a running back in round 1, especially if I have a top 8 pick in non-PPR. All those great catches that these stud receivers get, those mean nothing now. Half PPR, I'll still take wide receivers. I'm still going to get a decent edge there. But in non-PPR, man, running backs get pushed up.
And in non-PPR, like Pickens and Gabe Davis and those types of guys are more valuable.
Right.
Correct.
Low volume, high yards per catch, high ADOT, high touchdown rate.
That's the only thing, really.
That's it.
I got to ask Jamie, because you said at the top of the show that you were getting more excited about Amon-Ra St. Brown. You have him 6th, I think you said?
Yes.
What about a non-PPR?
He drops behind A.J. Brown, and I think that's it.
Okay. He drops behind Waddle for me.
I just want everyone to know Justin Jefferson last year would have been RB7 per game in non-PPR, which is an unbelievable stat. He wasn't the best wide receiver per game, by the way. That was Cooper Kupp. But go ahead.
Well, no, we have our draft on Tuesday night, for people that still play non-PPR, and you are certainly very adamant and angry at Dan and Joe Pisapia of Fantasy Pros because with 2 of the first 4 picks, Dan started the draft with Justin Jefferson and Joe took Jamar Chase at 4, which left me with McCaffrey at 3, at 2, and then Bijan Robinson went 3 ahead of Eckler, who went 5. So that was a little surprising, but Dan's counter to that was you kept saying you're not going to get a good running back, and he ended up with Joe Mixon, depending on how you feel about that. But he still was able to get a guy that has top 10 upside by going with Justin Jefferson. So I think it's just a matter of personal preference, but I don't think we would advise taking Jefferson. I don't want to speak for anybody, but taking Jefferson first overall in non-PPR, simply because the difference without the catch, is a little bit glaring at the top of that draft.
You mentioned that Justin Jefferson was 7th among running backs in non-PPR. I think it's worth saying, where did Amon-Ra St. Brown finish?
Oh gosh, I'm gonna guess.
You want to take a guess? I got it right here.
15.
No, 23rd. He was behind Alvin Kamara, Damian Pierce. This is on a per game basis. Najee Harris, 10.1 non-PPR points per game. Those catches mean a lot, obviously.
All right, let's do sleepers, breakouts, and busts at the wide receiver position. My favorite sleeper wide receiver is blank. We will go Heath, Dave, Jamie. Favorite sleeper wide receiver.
I'm using Fantasy Pros PPR like you told me to, and so I'm going to say Gabe Davis because he's at player 104. And really, if you look at the 4 sites that they're using, his highest ranking is pick 100. So Gabe Davis basically did last year, I think, about what we should have expected it for him to do. And he did it with a busted up ankle for half the year. And then when his ankle finally got right, his quarterback had a busted up elbow. I expect him to be second on this team in targets. I think he has top 30 potential at wide receiver for sure. And the best thing about him is he's that type of top 30 wide receiver that if he's right, 5 or 6 weeks of the season, he might just win for you.
Look who's this Gabe Davis guy.
I know. That's great.
I love it.
I will say my Gabe Davis ranking is much closer to my Gabe Davis ranking of last year. It's his ADP that's fallen 20 spots.
It's
or
crazy.
30.
It's great. Yeah.
All right, Dave, what do you got? Who's your favorite sleeper?
I was getting ready to say Sky Moore because I'm basing it off of Fantasy Pros ADP, but then I looked and I saw Rondale Moore, and his ADP is even lower. But I'm not even going to say him. I'm going back to a name that we've already said a couple times on this very podcast. Nico Collins' ADP is currently 177.3. Okay, that's round 15 for the potential number 1 receiver on the Houston Texans, a candidate to get north of 100 targets. In PPR, I don't see how you pass him up in round 9 or 10.
Okay. I thought you were going to say DJ Moore to complete the Moore group there. Sky Moore, Rondale Moore. But you go Nico Collins. Maybe Moore will be your breakout. We'll find out. Jamie, who's your favorite sleeper?
I'll say Elijah Moore. Just continue your theme there. I was waiting to see who was going to get chosen, and not chosen Anderson. I'm going to go with Robbie Chosen, whatever the hell his name is. I'm going to go with Elijah Moore. I think what we saw from him in his rookie season, hopefully, is more of who he is as a player and what his production can be. And last year was frustrating. With the quarterback scenario in New York, with the role that they were forced to play. I don't think he's an outside receiver. I think he's a slot guy. And I think going to Cleveland, fresh start, best quarterback he's ever played with in Deshaun Watson, because he did not get to play with Aaron Rodgers. So getting that, just better targets, better opportunities, and, just better overall situation. So he's a guy that still has top 30 upside, and you're getting him, in the 50s in some cases, but probably most likely based on ADPs that we're looking at in the 40s.
Okay, let's do breakouts. We'll go Dave, Jamie, Heath. Dave, who's your favorite breakout?
You're looking for a Moore, you're getting one. Demi Moore. We haven't seen her in film since the 90s, and I think she's due. No. Sky Moore is my breakout that I'll say. He's a shifty receiver who, by all accounts, has become more comfortable in an Andy Reid offense piloted by Patrick Mahomes. That should be enough to go after somebody like that in round 8 or round 9. Love the positive reports. I think he'll line up everywhere. I think he'll play a lot. I think he'll see a nice amount of targets.
Okay. How about Jamie, your favorite breakout?
I will go with the low-hanging fruit and take Garrett Wilson. Getting the quarterback upgrade with Aaron Rodgers and, building off what we saw with the non-Zach Wilson quarterbacks last year, I think that's something that could carry over for the majority of the season. 17 plus PPR points. I hope the ankle injury is not anything to worry about. He's been missing time. I love the what seems to be the touchdown celebration that he's going to do, the handshake between Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson. If you watch Hard Knocks. So I think it's going to be a fun year for him. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities, and this is going to be the next Devontae Adams that Aaron Rodgers gets to work with. So big season coming for Garrett Wilson in year 2.
Why Amon-Ra St. Brown over Garrett Wilson?
Oh, I think just, him in his 3rd season, I think this is going to be, the unlucky Jared Goff, everybody falling down at the one. We're going to get a touchdown spike for Amon-Ra St. Brown on top of the fact that he's going to be a 100-catch guy. So very excited about his opportunity, especially with the 6-game head start of not really a quality second option there. So I think it's a huge year coming for him.
Man, one of the decisions I hate making is Garrett Wilson versus Amon-Ra St. Brown versus AJ Brown. I just hate it. I just feel like I'm going to mess up,
I just feel like you're getting a great player.
I hope so. I'll tell you, and I'll get Heath's breakout in a second. I think the one that concerns me the most is AJ Brown. He actually had, last 9 games of the season, he had fewer targets than Devontae Smith. And there are some numbers I can throw out, probably more on tomorrow's show, but
Smith had more catches than him too for the season.
And Goddard didn't even have, Goddard had 69 targets. What if Goddard's over 100 targets? Then I think Wilson and St. Brown have a lot more target upside than AJ Brown.
I think the Eagles probably throw like 75 more passes this year too, though.
Well, they had the fewest running back targets in the NFL. They're definitely not going to have that. They intend.
Oh, I think they probably will.
They intend to throw the ball to DeAndre Swift. They are not going to have the fewest.
Well, they're going to lose more games than if they're going to take targets away from AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert to throw the ball to DeAndre Swift.
I mean, they got him for a reason. He's lined up outside. He's lined up all over the field. How are they not going to have they're going to have more than the fewest targets to running backs? All right.
They'll still be at the bottom half of the league though.
Half. Yeah. But that could be a 30 target difference or something like that.
What is that's something we should look at. Like, let's just say 800 rushing yards is the floor for Jalen Hurts.
Okay.
What's the highest a team's ever ranked in running back targets with a quarterback that runs for 800 yards?
I don't know how much.
Because I would say I can't think of
how much has Kyler Murray rushed for. Has he ever gotten to 800?
Quarterbacks that run for 800 yards?
Yeah, go ahead. I think I have 2 examples for you. But I would say
it's got to be 800. We're going to Azer stat this at 800 or leave it at 800.
I was just trying to think of Jalen Hurts' floor. Like, I think he probably rushes for like 950.
Well, look, Cam Newton ran for 754 yards in 16 games in Christian McCaffrey's rookie season. McCaffrey had 113 targets.
Yeah, DeAndre Swift's not Christian McCaffrey, but okay, that's fair. That's one.
I'm not giving him 113 targets.
How many targets did Barkley have last year?
Oh, that's a great question. I think he led the team.
So like 85.
Yeah, but what if it's all right, we're getting a little off track.
He had 76 targets last year.
76.
Okay, so Daniel Jones ran for 700 yards. Yeah.
That's a lot, though. I mean, that's a lot. 76 targets for a running back on the Eagles would be bad news for those guys. But all right. I'm just saying that over the last half of the season, AJ Brown did not separate himself from Devontae Smith like he did in the first half of the season. Dallas Goedert missed 5 games during that stretch, and they did not ever throw the ball to their running backs.
I wonder if Dallas Goedert being out is the reason that we saw Devontae Smith's targets go up.
When he came back, Smith still had the same targets as AJ.
Right.
Okay.
But I worry about both of those guys. I worry about how you know what? We always talk about the math problem with the 49ers. We never talk about it with the Eagles, but I do think that it exists.
And to be fair, obviously he missed some time last year. Jalen Hurts yet to run for 800 yards in his career. And there's only been 5 quarterbacks ever to have a 800-yard season. 6, I'm sorry. 800-yard rushing season since 2010.
Yeah. I would even go for how many 800-yard quarterbacks have produced top 5 wide receivers, I wonder. Or they just we don't throw that much. But the thing about AJ Brown is he is incredible. And
I'm going to guess DeAndre Hopkins 2020.
With Tannehill at 800? Oh, Kyler at 800?
Kyler at 819 yards.
Okay. How do you guys rank those 3? Sorry for the detour, Heath, waiting for your breakout. How do you rank Wilson, St. Brown, AJ Brown?
PPR, it's St. Brown, sorry, AJ Brown, and then Garrett Wilson.
Same.
Yep. And it's AJ, Wilson, and St. Brown.
Same.
What about Devontae Adams, the guy we haven't even said his name yet? I don't think.
He's after those 3 guys for me.
Easily after them in non-PPR. I am very close to moving him behind all 3 also in full PPR.
I think he's still ahead of all of them in all formats.
All right. Well, looking forward to debating that. Hey, Heath, who's that breakout for you?
Any of the rest of the second-year wide receivers, like Christian Watson, Chris Olave, Jahan Dotson. Which one? Drake London. All those guys. I think Olave and Watson are probably they're the top of my rankings. Both of those guys had an incredible year last year in terms of yards per route run. I gave this stat on CBS Sports HQ earlier in the week, but there have been 5 wide receivers as rookies who were better than Olave and Watson on a yards per route run basis. Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, AJ Brown, Tyreek Hill, and Odell Beckham.
Wow. I mean, that's amazing. And to have
there's for Watson's side of that, I think you put a little bit more caution into that because the sample size was so small. But yeah, both of those guys have the ability to just take a massive leap this year. Both of them should be drafted as top 20 wide receivers in that round 3, round 4 range.
Yeah, you guys feel good about a Drake London breakout? I mean, look, his ADP on Fantasy Pros is wide receiver 26, and it's 68th overall. In our drafts, he's going in the 40s. So, or maybe in the early 50s. Sorry, I think I took him 50th overall in our pick by pick. Hesitantly, by the way. So that's a tough one. We love the player. We don't love the situation. Drake London, Heath, you making that breakout case?
Yeah, especially at that cost. I think he's around 4 or 5 pick, and I think he's going to be a top 24 wide receiver. I expect he and Pitts to dominate targets. I think Ritter will be better than Mariota was, even if he's not good. And London is a stud talent.
Jamie and Dave, when's the earliest you would take Drake London?
And around 5. Not as excited as Heath.
In round 5, depending on what receivers are on the board. But I do think that there's also the Taylor Heineke factor of if Ritter does stink, that they make the switch, and that will help, I think, the pass catchers.
All right, blank will be a bust. Let's go Jamie, Heath, Dave.
Devontae Adams will be a bust.
Okay, go ahead, make the case.
Poor quarterback play. I think the downgrade from Derek Carr to Jimmy Garoppolo will matter, especially if Garoppolo is not 100%. We know he has a hard time finishing seasons when he goes into them at 100%. So I don't like the quarterback set up there for him. Again, I'll go back to the stat I've continued to say that wide receivers, there's only been 16 wide receivers in the last 30 years, 20 years, whatever it is. I can tell you the exact number, but there's only been 17 wide receivers the last 20 years that have averaged 15 PPR points or more. And only 3, which is what really matters here for Adams, only 3 have been at the level that he was at last season of over 18 PPR points per game. And so I think he will still be good. I don't think you're going to get a crater of a season for him. Sorry, go ahead. You about to say something?
No, I was going to ask you what the qualifier was. There's only been 16 or 18 that with what?
15 PPR, average 15 PPR points per game per season or more. You want me to get the exact thing for you so I'm not just babbling?
No, that's what I missed. And with a certain level of quarterback play?
I didn't look at all the quarterbacks. Here it is. I'm sorry. It's not 20 years. 10 years. Last 10 years, 17 wide receivers, 30 or older, have averaged at least 15 points per game or more. Only 3 were at the level of what Adams did last year, which was Jordy Nelson in 2016, Brandon Marshall in 2015. That was with Ryan Fitzpatrick. Jordy's with Aaron Rodgers. And Antonio Brown in 2018 was with Ben Roethlisberger. So, again, Adams can certainly get there. And Adam, you and I have had this discussion. Is he one of these outliers that just has these, continuing fantastic seasons? And he certainly could. I know you made the case more, I think, with DeAndre Hopkins. I'm sure it applies to Adams as well, who's just, turning, year 30, age 30. So, again, I'm not completely running away from him. I'm just not taking him in the first round, and I'm taking him behind these other receivers. So it's a lot of, where he was being drafted. I think we're starting to see him slide a little bit because mostly the concern about Garoppolo, which is my biggest one. But I will probably not draft a lot of Devontae Adams unless he falls to the middle to the end of round 2.
All right, Heath, who's a bust for you?
I'll go with DK Metcalf. I just think the addition of JSN, DK's never really been able to become a bona fide number one with Tyler Lockett there. It's always been a 1A, 1B situation. And it, as good as JSN is, and as good as has looked so far in camp, and as good as he was with both Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave on the same team, this might be a 1A, 1B, 1C situation. So I do think the touchdowns probably bounce back. I do think Metcalf will be better in non and half PPR than he is in full PPR. I don't think he's worth a round 3 pick in any format.
I like him in our drafts because your rankings have him much lower than ADP. So round 4, round 4, would you be okay with Metcalf in round 4, or would you rather wait till round 5? Obviously, you'd rather wait, but would you be okay with him in round 4?
I'm round 5. I think everybody else is round 4, but I'm round 5.
I'm round 5 as well. I did that one. We did that one draft. I think it was late July where I just decided I was going to take quarterback and 4 running backs, maybe tight end. No, it was quarterback, tight end, and 3 running backs, 2 running backs. Whatever it was. I got DK Metcalf in like round 6. It was perfect.
No, good luck doing that good luck doing that again. Dave, who blank will be a bust?
I don't have an exciting answer here because I think ADP is pretty good for wide receivers outside of DK Metcalf. That's who I was originally going to say. Odell Beckham has an ADP of 102.5. I'm not touching him. Not at that price. I'm waiting at least 2 rounds after that to get him.
Okay, to recap, Heath's favorite sleeper was Gabe Davis. His favorite breakout, he talked about a lot of the year 2 wide receivers. And the biggest bust is DK Metcalf with a 3rd round ADP. For Dave, it was Nico Collins and Rondale Moore as sleepers, Sky Moore as a breakout, and Odell Beckham as a bust. For Jamie, it was Elijah Moore as a sleeper, Garrett Wilson as the breakout, the low-hanging fruit breakout as he coined it, and Devontae Adams as a bust, but still a 2nd round pick, just going behind some of the younger guys. All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll get into the early rounds, maybe the first 2 rounds of average draft position, according to Fantasy Pros. We'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today. All right, let's take a look at ADP. And in round 1, we have Justin Jefferson as the 1st overall pick. This is Fantasy Pros PPR average draft position. Jefferson is 1st overall. Jamar Chase is 3rd overall. Cooper Kupp is 6th. Tyreek Hill is 7th, and Stephon Diggs is 11th overall. That is 5 wide receivers: Jefferson, Chase, Kupp, Hill, and Diggs in the 1st round. Jefferson 1st overall, Chase 3rd, Kupp 6th, Tyreek Hill 7th, Stephon Diggs 11th. Do you guys feel like those 5 wide receivers should be 1st round picks and are the only wide receivers that should be top 12 1st round picks?
Yep.
They definitely should be 1st round picks. I don't have a problem if somebody wants to take any of the next tier guys. Again, I'm not going to take Devontae Adams, but we see him in round 1. But Amon-Ra St. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, I could see them going at the end of round 1 in PPR.
Yeah, I've got Lamb at pick 10, and I've got Amon-Ra St. Brown at pick 13. So I think those guys should be in consideration in full PPR. But I agree with all the other guys who are going there.
And these are your top 5 players in some order. Jefferson, Chase for all 3 of you. For Dave, Kupp is 3rd. For Jamie, Kupp is 4th behind Tyreek Hill. For Heath, Kupp is 5th behind Tyreek Hill and Stephon Diggs. And Diggs is 5th for Jamie and Dave. But I guess we should debate that a little bit. We should debate these top 5 guys. They are going in the order of Jefferson, Chase, Kupp, Hill, Diggs. And I got to start with this. I think I know the answer, but got to ask it. Cooper Kupp was so much better than Jefferson or Chase in 2021. And if you only look at the Stafford games, the games he played with Stafford, he would have averaged 3.5 more PPR fantasy points than Justin Jefferson. As it is, he averaged 1.1 more fantasy points than Jefferson. If you include one game without Stafford where he was terrible, Kupp was terrible. But if only the Stafford games, 3.5 more. he was the best player in fantasy 2 years in a row when he was healthy and Matthew Stafford was healthy. I think not the highest scoring, but the most valuable, no question. So why is Cooper Kupp not number one? In fact, third for Dave, fourth for Jamie, fifth for Heath. Jamie, first word, why you can't put Kupp number one?
Well, he's already banged up after missing half the season last year. And so, for, again, his age, which is starting to become, a little bit of a concern. Can't say the same thing about Adams and not say the same thing about Kupp. He's 30. So do you worry about him finishing a full season? Do you worry about Matthew Stafford finishing a full season? Now you can say the same thing about Tyreek Hill and Tua, because clearly that's a similar scenario. His quarterback did not finish the full season also, but his quarterback is also not 35 years old with still maybe a potential back injury. So I'm a little concerned about Kupp. I'm not going to run away from him in the first round. I'm not going to run away from him as a top 10 pick, but we are nitpicking here with, what I would say is the 4 best wide receivers. I would take him over Diggs in terms of Kupp, but again, hit that age, now coming off a significant injury a year ago, injured again, with a soft tissue problem. Who knows how that could be, recurring during the season. So I don't care that he's stretching in warm-ups during camp. I'm still a little concerned until I see him back on the field and practicing in full.
Anyone else want to weigh in there?
I only have, like I said in February, I think that I am going to be more cautious with players who are currently hurt, and that's the only reason he's behind Stephon Diggs for me. If you promised me that Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp were going to play 17 games this year, he'd be the number 1 overall pick. But the age, the currently being injured, and the quarterback being an injury risk, is too much.
Okay. He's Cooper Kupp's 30.
Yeah.
Tyreek Hill's 29. Stephon Diggs is 29. Matthew Stafford is definitely an injury risk. I think Tua Tagovailoa is too. Can't say the same thing about Josh Allen, even though he did hurt his elbow on his throwing arm last year. We talk a lot about going for the upside in fantasy drafts. And Adam, you really laid out my case perfectly. The way he's been with Matthew Stafford sets him apart from everybody at the wide receiver position. I just feel like it's a little bit safer to go with Jefferson and Chase. This is a dude, Cooper Kupp, who's going to get double-digit targets every single game. I thought we wanted that in fantasy. And the Rams defense is not going to be as good as it's been in the past. Their personnel has changed quite a bit. I think they're going to be throwing a lot. And I think Cooper Kupp, I think you can make the case for him to be right back in that 24 to 26 PPR point per game range. He's got it in him. The worries are that he's a year older than Tyreek Hill and Stephon Diggs, and that his quarterback might get beat up a little bit more so than those other 2 receivers' quarterbacks. So if that makes a difference to you, you're probably not going to hurt yourself that much with Tyreek Hill or Stephon Diggs, but Coop can be a league winner. There's no question about it. He's already been.
I think we're going to end our show just continuing this discussion about these 5 so we don't shortchange these guys or the round 2 guys. We'll pick it up tomorrow with round 2, but I want to just give some numbers here. Justin Jefferson was the number 1 wide receiver last year. He was actually number 2 per game behind Kupp, but he had 128 catches, 1,800 yards, and 8 touchdowns. He actually had a rushing touchdown too. Jefferson was tied for the NFL lead with the most catches in which he was tackled at the 1 or 2 yard line. And it's pretty hard to believe that he had 184 targets and only 8 receiving touchdowns. But just think of 108 and 28 catches, 1,800 yards. Cooper Kupp was on pace with Matthew Stafford for 153 catches, a lot more than Jefferson, and 1,728 yards, which is fewer than Jefferson. Tyreek Hill, in his 12 games with a healthy Tua, he was on pace for 119 catches, a little bit less than Jefferson, and 1,768 yards, a little bit less than Justin Jefferson.
He was on pace for 119 catches?
With Tua, and he finished with
119.
Yeah, I know. Both. Yeah.
And you said what'd you say? 1,798?
1,768.
Yes.
68. So 58 yards difference. It's crazy.
Yeah, and 2 more receiving touchdowns. Stephon Diggs, in the first 8 games of the season before Josh Allen's elbow injury, he had very similar numbers to Jefferson, but a lot more touchdowns. He was on pace for 128 catches, which I think is what Jefferson was, 1,821 yards, almost exactly the same as Jefferson, and 15 touchdowns. So I have now taken the full season for Jefferson and the best sample sizes for Tyreek Hill, Cooper Kupp, and Stephon Diggs. They are all pretty similar. Do you know who doesn't even come close to this? Is Jamar Chase last year. Jamar Chase, his 17-game pace was only 1,482 yards. Everyone else in the 17 to 1,800 or more range, Jamar Chase had a really low yards per catch. It was weird. But we all have him. You all have him number 2. I know a lot of people have him number 1. Nobody wants to doubt Jamar Chase. I just did think that was interesting, Heath, that his production was actually on a per catch basis disappointing, I'd say.
Well, when you compare the games that he played to everybody else's Azer stats, that is true. But he averaged 20.3 fantasy points per game, which was 1 point fewer than Tyreek Hill, 2 points fewer than Kupp and Jefferson, and almost 2 points better than Stephon Diggs. So I think to say that he was not in this, like, it is true comparing all of his games to everybody else's best games. He was not in the same.
Not everybody else's best games. Everybody's games with a healthy quarterback. That's what it was.
Okay.
It was.
Well, he hasn't had any concerns right now about that.
Yeah.
Didn't Joe Burrow have an appendectomy before the season last year?
Yeah, but
when was he fully recovered from that?
He played week 1. All I know is that's what it was. It
Josh
wasn't
Allen played the whole second half of the season.
You know what? It's not. I don't know if it's worth debating. Everybody is taking Jefferson first and Chase second.
Yeah.
That's an Azer statting, Heath. What percentage of health was the player of the 100% of snaps that they played?
But is it a fair Azer stat?
Well, I think it is really worth noting how different Stephon Diggs' numbers were before the Allen injury and after. And not just that, how different Josh Allen's injury was. You're talking about a 5,000-yard passer compared to like a 4,000-yard passer before and after the injury.
That Diggs target share situation is one of the ones that we might get to the middle of the season and like wonder why we didn't pay enough attention to it. Because if he gets the target share that he's had when Josh Allen was healthy, then I'm not sure Gabe Davis or Dalton Kincaid are going to matter. But they're sure talking about him not getting the same target share, and he doesn't seem to like that.
Well, can you Azer stat the Diggs Azer stat by taking out week 2 when Gabe Davis didn't play? When he went absolutely nuclear against the Titans?
No, but the thing is, Gabe Davis didn't really get that many targets. I don't think he really influenced Stephon Diggs. And
well, no, if you're going to Azer stat it all the way, buddy.
No, listen, the point is not so much the target share thing. It's that Josh Allen is I think, capable of reaching another level as a passer, because before he hurt his elbow, he was on pace for 5,100 yards and 40 touchdowns, and he was throwing 37.3 times per game.
But is that fair, though, that he's going to be that much better than everybody else?
What do you mean?
Well, if Josh Allen does that, it'll be that much better than everybody else. Is that fair?
Diggs will be or Allen will be?
Both, potentially. I mean,
no, I'm just saying that I think
want more parity.
You really have to.
It would have been really unfair if Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford hadn't gotten hurt last year. That would have been completely unfair.
Oh, you're going back to that thing. Okay. Well, if you look at end of season numbers, you may not see the storyline of how the Bills' passing game looked before and after the elbow injury. That was my only point.
No, you're 100% accurate. I mean, that's why these guys are first round picks. You know, that's why Kupp has the chance to bounce back to that level. And, you know, you still buy into him, even though he's 30. You buy into and Stafford's injury, Chris. You buy into, you know, Chase being, you know, Heath has made this, you know, argument earlier this offseason when he was saying he was number 1. Does he get back to his yards per catch as a rookie? You know, what if that happens? My God, he could be just an absolute monster. And Jefferson just builds off of it, and maybe the touchdowns creep up a little bit more with the hope that Kirk Cousins. Pete sent me a screen grab of a game between the Packers and the Vikings, and he paused it where Jefferson is standing by himself. Jair Alexander was playing zone and passed him off to the middle. Nobody was there, and Cousins was waiting for Thielen to clear in the flat and in traffic. And Jefferson, like he there was nobody within 15 yards of him. Like, God knows how many times that happened, you know, because Cousins sometimes gets a little lost in the red zone. So if Cousins has some touchdown regression, which I think we've talked about, and then you get Jefferson being the benefit of that, he's gonna, you know, be the player you're hoping for, and maybe the unfair advantage that you have at the position.
Yeah, Dave, last thing I'd say is when you look at guys who finish as number 1, if you're out there and you're considering Chase versus Jefferson, a lot of people are, the guy who's number 1 is almost never has T. Higgins on his team. You just don't
Mhm.
see it. I could give you the stat, but I won't do it. But just trust me.
Oh, yeah, don't give us a stat that'll help tell your story.
Well, it's just a little convoluted, but don't. Yeah,
I'm
please.
shocked.
So
No,
that
it's
points
just
us back
wording.
towards Cup
It's
or
just wording.
Diggs.
Absolutely. You know, like Chase is amazing, but you just pretty much never see it. A guy finish as wide receiver 1 with another top 16 wide receiver on his team. That's
Well, I guess
basically
this goes back to when Heath, you were arguing for
Right.
Chase over Jefferson. Is how much do you expect Jordan Addison's upgrade over Adam Thielen to matter, and how much do you expect a full season of TJ Hawkinson to really matter? You know, especially forget about what you think about Hawkinson as a player. The targets were there for him, you know, when he was, you know, brought in. And so if those two guys are commanding more targets than the combination of Hawkinson, or at least the tight end for a full season, and, you know, Adam Thielen, then it could be a huge problem for Jefferson. I would just, you know, go back to the run game could be a little bit more suspect, and their defense is probably going to be more suspect. And that should lend to still being top 3 in pass attempts, which is probably a huge advantage for Justin Jefferson.
over the last 7 seasons, 17 pairs of teammates have finished top 16 at wide receiver in PPR, and we've never had one of those teammates finish as wide receiver 1 in PPR. We have had it in non-PPR, Jordy Nelson, and he and Chris Godwin both finished as wide receiver 2. But typically the guy who finishes as wide receiver 1 is a complete target hog. So consider that for Tyreek Hill. Had a crazy amount of targets last year, but consider that for Jamar Chase. Consider that it probably doesn't even matter because it could happen. And okay, I gave you 2 examples who finished as wide receiver 2, but T. Higgins could be a bit of a hindrance to Jamar Chase. In the games that Higgins was healthy, Chase was on pace for 170 targets. I think overall he was on pace for 190 targets. So that is it for today's show. We will get into round 2 and beyond. Ask yourself this question, folks: does any wide receiver have a tougher schedule than Garrett Wilson? It's something we might talk about on tomorrow's show. And we'll leave it at that. We also have a mailbag on Saturday. Have a great day, everybody. And we'll speak to you tomorrow on Fantasy Football Today.